So this evening we're going to be looking at passing the torch to teenagers. I don't know why they asked me to do this one, but what's that? Yeah, it's a funny one, but it's actually a real funny topic to kind of talk about because it's something that we've been trying to do, like practically with the teens ever since we landed here. Me and Rachel's first kind of tour around Spokane Baptist Church after having lunch with Don and Kathy and Heather and Josh up at the Tucker's house. And we went and did a tour around the church at the harvest party. And we got to meet like the handful of teenagers around. And we just thought, well, if we were here, how would we do this differently? How would we change things? How would we keep the teens here? How would we keep people engaged? How would we kind of try to change the culture? And a lot of that is that's the tough part of youth ministry, is stepping in and doing something differently that's been put in place for so long. You know, even if it's just a couple of years, people get used to it and they don't like being uncomfortable. So change is kind of uncomfortable sometimes. And I think that's the big problem with a lot of this stuff. So passing the torch means that change is inevitably going to happen. You know, it's going to have to happen. Otherwise, who's going to be here next, right? So that means change will happen. It has to be kind of welcomed as well. And I think we can look in the Bible, and we're going to tonight and see a couple of different examples of how older people took along young people and passed the torch to them and gave them the opportunity to do and to be and to step in and not just kind of let them go and see what happens, but let them go and help them succeed. So I think that's the big deal here. We're not just trying to say, hey, you're a teenager, go get them, Tiger. It's more like, hey, you're a teenager, let's help you, let's train you, let's love you, let's point you in the right direction, then go get them, Tiger. You know? So I think that's kind of what I'm going to try to touch on tonight, of just the examples we have in the Bible and how we can kind of implement that with the teenagers that we have, even in this church and even once you may come in the future as well. So that's the idea of what we're going to look at. And one of my main things, I believe, truly how to help teenagers is mentoring. So mentoring is a big deal. Mentoring is kind of what helped me get out of a lot of my struggles and problems in my life. And it's a weird one because you kind of have to trust the people that you're talking to. Even this week, I had a meeting with Elder Don. He is my mentor. He's someone I look up to, who I respect. And I go to him and I say, I need help. And Elder Don puts up with my bad accent and gives me wisdom, and it's fantastic. But to get to that point, you need to have a relationship, and you need to have trust, and you need to have a love or a respect for each other. And I think the way that the world is right now, it doesn't really allow you to have that. There's a lot of trying to tear away at those relationships that you can build, even to the point of kids and their parents. You know, people are trying to get in there, and so we are fighting, sadly, a losing battle in that sense. But it's a battle worth fighting for still. Elder Don's already said we had a handful of teenagers when we first come here, and our register now, of all the names, we have 72 teenagers that have come either through our youth group, our Bible study, or church on a Sunday morning. That's been 5 years, and God's really blessed that, especially when 2 of those years have been a pandemic, you know. But the difference the thing that's kind of set us apart is that we take mentoring very seriously. We take it seriously so much I can tell you that I personally mentor 6 teenage boys myself. And that's a lot. That's a lot. And on my schedule, my Mondays are like mentoring Mondays typically, because that's when I do a lot of that stuff. Whether it's phone calls, texts, emails, face-to-face, coffees, whatever it is, that's usually the day that I'm trying to pour out into young people. And it's something that's incredibly valuable because you build that relationship. And it doesn't start there. It can't start with, let me pour out my heart to you, random stranger. It has to be built up over time. So I just wanted to kind of highlight what the world thinks of mentoring. And this is a definition from the dictionary. The act or process of helping and guiding another person to support their personal development. That sounds great. That really does. Like if someone turned around to me and said, that this is what we're going to be doing. I'm going to be supporting you, helping, guiding you, all of this. Okay, that sounds good. But you're missing something out there, because without Jesus in the mix of all of this, there's just going to be failure. You know, you can help me as much as you physically can, but unfortunately, you and I both have limits. Jesus does not. And I think that's the whole point here. Who are we trying to rely on? So the world's view is, I can help you. No, incorrect. Because otherwise that's just a sinner helping another sinner, trying to be less sinful. And that just doesn't really work. You know, that's not going to kind of get as great results as we'd expect with Jesus in the mix. So a Christian definition, and this is a guy from England did this definition here, someone who is pointing you to Jesus in all circumstances, who's praying with you, encouraging you, walking with you. And there's a big difference here, because, you know, you get business mentoring is quite typical to the top. They want to support you and guide you, how to make the most money, how to bring in the most clients, how to support, how to build up, that's a good business way of doing things. The way that we should be looking at it is church isn't a business. We are in business to help people towards Jesus, but we're not here to help people get money. We're not helping, we're not a get-rich-quick scheme. We are, let's get you to Jesus, and we can all be sinners in front of him together, and that's the whole point here. Someone who's pointing you to Jesus in all circumstances. And I think the way I see this is with the teenagers, they get a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? Influences from the rest of the world. And even right in their hand, when they've got their mobile phone in front of them, they have anyone that they want, they can be influenced by. And I have had these conversations with some of the teenage boys that I'm mentoring, the young men, and it's sad because they say, well, this guy said this. What do you think about that? And I said, well, why are you taking his word over the Bible? Well, he's real, he's alive, he's now, wow, okay, let's talk about it, But it's the face-to-face value that they really do value. There was some statistics that I was going to put into this PowerPoint, and I didn't end up putting in there, but I'm just going to throw them off the top of my head here. 76% of young ladies in America, age 11 to 18, have either attempted suicide, had suicidal thoughts, or thought about doing something incredibly harmful to them because they felt that no one loved them. No one wanted to pour into them. And then the other statistics for young men at the same age was 56%, or 52%, was young men having those type of thoughts. That's gone up in the last 10 years by a lot. And a lot of that is because of the influx of online stuff. And I mean, you can blame TikTok and stuff like that, but it's really people allowing these things to take control of their lives. So attention is a big deal. And we see that. We have some young men come to our youth group, some young ladies come to our youth group, and we're talking to them, and you're trying to have eye contact, and they're like looking all over, and they can't make eye contact with you, even for a couple of seconds, because it's awkward, and they're not used to it, and they're not used to someone turning around and saying, hey, I really care about you. And then, like last Friday, we talked about Jesus being the foundation of their lives, and I said, what the love of God and how important it is. And they said, well, I've never heard anyone really say that they love me. And I was like, wow, let's talk a little bit more about that, because that's heartbreaking. That's absolutely heartbreaking. I grew up in a rough home, but I knew I was loved. I knew that my nan loved me with all of her heart. I knew that my mum loved me. And as much as my brothers loved to punch me, they loved me as well, right? There was still love there. But for some people, they've grown up in this age where it's okay to just not show that affection. And it's okay to find your value in other things instead of real interaction. So I want to kind of talk to you about that tonight. And again, we're going to use the Bible as examples. It's not just going to be my stories. We're going to try and look at a couple of different examples here. But I want to show you this quote here that kind of took me, I like it a lot. You teach a little by what you say. You teach most by what you are. And I think to reach teenagers, to reach young people in general, to reach anyone, consistency is a big deal. Just showing up and being that same person is really, really important. And I think when you look at this quote, your example speaks so much more than you could ever really understand. How you live your life. How you live, what you say, how you treat people, it all really matters. And especially when you look at teenagers. The biggest gap that the church has all across America, and actually all across the West, is 16-year-olds up to 25-year-olds. As soon as they hit 16 and they can leave home, or they leave school, or whatever it is, not go into advanced learning, they leave church as well. And they come back maybe when they've made some mistakes, and they realize and they remember and they go, oh, I felt loved there, so I'll come back again. But those 7 to 9 years difference right there, that's a big hole in the church of the West. And it's because they see the church and they go, well, you're hypocrites. And then they walk away and they've had that influence and the world's allowed those lies, it's placed those lies into their heads and into their hearts, and they've held tight to those. And no one spent the time to say, we're all sinners. We're all bad people. We all need Jesus. Instead, they hear the church is bad because they're telling you that you're bad. And that's what they believe. Spending time with people changes people's lives. One-on-one time with a young person could change the course of their whole life because they just feel like you are valuing them for who they are. So mentoring to me is an incredibly valuable thing. I didn't have a solid father figure growing up, and I sought out people in my church, usually the big, strong, tough guys, because I thought, hey, I want to be like you guys. And my first mentor I had was a guy called Bernard. He was my lead pastor. He was about 6'3", 6'4", giant of a man. And I walked in and I wore ripped jeans to church one Sunday, and he slapped me on the side of the head and said, how dare you wear ripped jeans to church? This is God's place. And I was like, whoa. Well, I can't go home and change them because all my jeans are ripped. So what do you do? And what he did was he took me out jean shopping and he bought me some new trousers and was like, this is the way it should be. You should respect God's place. You should respect the church. You should want to be better. You don't have to be the same person here. You don't have to be what the world expects of you. You can be a better person because Jesus allows that. And even that one moment, he took me out for a coffee. He took me out to go get some new trousers. And then it was like life-changing because I suddenly thought, wow, people can see me differently. And over those next couple of years, I decided to change my long hair to short hair and to remove some of the piercings in my face and to live life differently because that one person spent that one moment to say, actually, you can be different. God has asked you to live differently, to be different to what the world expects of you. So do it. And he encouraged me, and he did it in a loving way, apart from the slap, But still, it's incredible how those little moments can help steer you and how God was fully involved in that, okay? I'm going to pray, and then we're going to jump into the Bible here so that it's not, again, less of my story is more of the Bible, okay? Lord Jesus, thank you so much for this evening. Thank you for the examples that we're going to be reading through in your word. God, thank you that we can take your word as truth, that we can apply it to our lives, and we can leave changed because of who you are and what you've done. Thank you for all you do for us, for your love and your mercy, for your son, Jesus Christ, who died on the cross for us. In your name I pray. Amen. Okay, so we're going to be looking at Moses and Joshua. So if you want to turn to the book of Joshua, chapter 1. We've been going through the book of Joshua with the teens. So it's kind of a fun one. When they heard about passing the torch, I was like, oh, we've been doing this with the teens. This is fantastic. But passing the torch is kind of an art. Getting it right, doing it well is quite an art form, really. Not just throwing someone into the spotlight and saying, you're going to do great because see ya. But like an actual transition, a changeover of power, of leadership stepping down so leadership can step up type of situation. And I think that's something that needs to be perfected and worked on all over, but especially in the church. Eventually when I'm no longer a young enough person to be with the teens, then we'll get a new youth pastor in here and there'll be a transition. And I want that to be a smooth transition. I don't want it to be like this clunky, we prefer him rather than you thing, because that's not healthy. That's not the way it should be. And that can be tough, and I've spoken to different pastors who've taken over churches before, and half the congregation have left because they didn't like how it happened. And you think this can be worked on, even at a Christian level, of how to do this and how to pass the torch well. So for teens especially, we can see this happening throughout the whole Bible. We can see this with Moses. So Moses prepared Joshua. He prepared Joshua to lead Israel. If you look at basically Exodus through to Deuteronomy, they have this really long journey, and we're not going to be covering that big chunk of scripture because that would be ridiculous. But basically the long journey of leading out from Egypt, from slavery, through the desert, through the seas being parted, being guided by the pillar of light, the manna from heaven, the water from the rock, the protection, the light in the darkness, and the protection in the daytime, God being there all the way through, Moses leading the way, and he had this guy, Joshua, with him. And I think the great thing we can read about that is that Moses, we know, is God's chosen deliverer. He's the guy that was going to bring them out, okay? He marched the millions of Jews across the sandy desert from slavery to freedom, but he had this young man with him. He prepared him. He installed confidence and vision into him. He even gave him a different name. You get nicknames nowadays, don't you? So it's good. But even just think that Moses saw something in Joshua that was great. That was like God had put him in the right spot at the right time. And you can even read that Moses took Joshua up with him to the top of Mount Sinai, where he got to see the full power, the full glory of God. That's incredible. Joshua got to witness firsthand how good God is. And why is that so important? Because you know what? Moses the whole time could have said, God is good. Well, why is God good? Well, because I'm saying so, okay? Well, actually, that's not how he did it. He was like, I'm saying so, but come with me and witness it. Let's go up the mountain and come and see firsthand. Because when I'm gone and you're here, you're going to be in charge and you're going to need to know. You're going to need to know on your own relationship with God needs to be strong. And I think that's the key part here as well. Teenagers nowadays, I say this quite a lot. I said it at the prayer retreat on Saturday. If I could lift up every single teenager and plonk them in front of Jesus and say, Jesus, teen, Jesus, meet each other, be best friends, change lives, fantastic. But that's all in my power. That's nothing to do with their relationship with God. And I think that the great thing that happened with Joshua here is his relationship with God was strong. His relationship with God was strengthened by Moses. It was encouraged by Moses. And it was pushed, go up that mountain with me. I'm not going to leave you at the bottom. You're coming with me. We're going to do these things together. We're going to do it hand in hand. He's not saying I'm the leader, so I'm going in on my own. Come with me. And I think that's an important thing to think about when we're trying to pass the torch. It's allowing those people to see the inner workings of what's going to happen. Teenagers at this church are going to be the next generation of Spokane Baptist Church. Unless Jesus comes back soon, they're going to be the guys stepping in here. Maybe the next pastor is in the Pastor Tom room on a Sunday. Who knows? And that's really important to think about. How are we encouraging their personal relationship with Jesus? Not just saying you believe this because I believe this, but you believe this because you know this. You know this to be true. So Joshua got to go up on the Mount Sinai and see the power and see the glory. And what did that do for his relationship with God? It fortified it. It made it foundationally so strong that when Moses did pass away, and we read in Joshua 1 through 5, now after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, what a great title, by the way. It came to pass that the Lord spake unto Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' minister, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, thou and all this people, into the land which I do give to them, even to the children of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, that I given unto you, as I said unto Moses, from the wilderness and this Lebanon, even unto the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and unto the great sea toward the going down of the sun, shall be your coast. Verse 5, there shall not be any man able to stand before thee all the days of thy life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with thee. I will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. What an incredible promise But promises are great. They're okay if you don't believe them, but they're great if you do believe them. They're fantastic. There's something to hold on to if you really do believe. And Joshua could believe them. And because he knew that Lord God was with Moses. And when he called Moses his servant, he knew that Moses was truly his servant because he had seen it all being practiced in front of him. So letting people in, allowing them to see the inner works of what's going on, of how things are happening in your Christian lives. It's not just about a position at church, it's about your personal walk. If you have a young person that you're able to invite in and say, this is how I study the Bible. Hey, let's pray together so you can hear how I pray. Hey, let's read the Bible together. Let's do this. Let's go and knock on some doors together so you can see how I talk about Jesus. Let's do these things together. Because togetherness is what's going to be able to build those relationships. You're not asking them to go on their own. You're not sending them out to fail. And if there is a failure, you're with them. That's the big deal here. There has been so many times that I've failed on my own. And I've come back and I thought, I'm the worst person in the world. And when I failed with someone, like Bernard, when we went to, where did we go? We went to Winchester in England, and it's a big cathedral. And he went and he did this incredible lunch of all the pastors around, and he asked me to stand up and pray. And I can remember that was the worst prayer I've ever prayed. I was all like, I don't even know this. Mumbling away, and he was like, Jamie, speak into the microphone. And I was like, oh, yes, sir. And it was that moment I felt it was a failure. I thought it was a complete failure. I walked away going, oh, man, this is terrible. He thinks I'm terrible at speaking. I'm never going to be able to do anything. This is the worst day of my life. And I came out and he said, well, practice, practice, practice. It wasn't all bad. You got back on, you didn't walk away. And there was encouragement. But if I was on my own and I did that and I walked away thinking this is the worst day ever, there's no encouragement. There's no fallback. There's no loving figure there saying, it's okay. You're going to do better next time. And I think that's the big deal. For me, I'm going to say Pastor Bernard or Bernard quite a lot just because he was my first mentor kind of guy. For you guys, you may be in that position to be a mentor to someone, to start speaking into people's lives. And I really encourage you to do that. It doesn't have to just be a teenager at this church. It could be anyone. And it's a funny thing because when you think about how God opens doors, there are possibilities everywhere for you to speak into someone's life. So you just need to take that opportunity. So Moses took Joshua with him, poured into him. Moses had confidence in Joshua. And because Moses had confidence, the nation of Israel had confidence as well. And why? Because they saw that God had chose this guy to step into that as well. Just like I was with Moses, I will be with you. I will not fail you. I will not forsake you. That's incredible. And that's because Moses got him to that point of saying, you're going to lead, your relationship has to be strong. You're going to lead, you have to believe in God. You have to know who he is. You have to be there and be ready to step into that. So the nation of Israel had confidence because the way that the torch was been passed on was in full faith. Faith in God. Not in the human himself, but in God who is leading the charge there, okay? So, second one we're going to look at here is Paul and Timothy. Paul had a loving mentor relationship to Timothy. Paul carefully selected and trained Timothy as the right person for the job. We can read in 1 Timothy as well. So I'm going to try and find, I should have bookmarked it, but it's a tiny book. We're going to have fun with that. But Paul basically, he saw the qualities that Timothy had, and he saw the potential that Timothy had. We can read that in the Bible as well. And it says that he had a great reputation, that his foundation was strong because of the people who had led him there beforehand. And that's a very rare thing. That's a very rare thing. If you ask the people at church here, the teens at church, even on a Friday night, you come to our youth group, the split that we have from Christian homes to non-Christian homes is very, very distinct. It's like a 75 to 25% non-Christian to Christian. And it's crazy because you think it's not just the Christians who come here, but they come for a reason. You guys are going to have to laugh because I'm going to go to my contents page because I can't find Timothy right now. So there we go. I was looking for the page number. I'll get there faster that way. But the point here is Paul found someone who was already foundationally set up, who already had a belief, who already had a trust and had been installed that knowledge from a grandparent. And you think that's a fantastic thing to be able to find and see in someone, but it's quite rare, especially nowadays. There's a lot of broken homes. There's a lot of situations that we just do not understand. Not many people have that perfect home situation anymore. I really love the idea of Paul and Timothy, just because I imagine Paul walking into a youth group and just being like, no, you right there, I see you, and I see that potential, and I see that reputation, and I see who you are. I'm choosing you to go with me to come and do this ministry stuff. And I think that's a great thing to be able to see. I was chosen to go to Africa for different reasons. I was the misbehaving teenager. I got kicked out of school when I was 13, 14 years old, and a deacon from my old church in Andover, Andy Swatton, decided to take me to Africa to sort my life out. Different reasons, right? But I'd hope that he saw some form of potential in me to just take him with me, or just a reason to do that. But Paul saw Timothy and was like, this is the guy. This is the guy who I'm going to take. He chose him because of the potential for the future, and Paul chose Timothy to continue the ministry work that he had put in place. So Paul was preparing for someone else to step into the ministry once his time was done. So really, Paul was trying to train himself out of a job. That's a big deal here as well. Passing the torch, it's not just about like when you die. Nowadays, we have retirement. It's great. So it's one of those things of when you retire, there needs to be a torch passing as well. And I think the way that we see this with Paul and Timothy is a real delicate, loving, and then kind of a throw in a fire kind of situation. We can read that Paul met Timothy whilst traveling through Lystra. And Timothy was a son of a Jewish mother and a Greek father. Timothy had a good reputation, and people spoke well of him. I think that's a great thing to know, that people will show up and be able to see that reputation that you have. Again, how we live, not just what we say, the example that we put out, it speaks a lot. Acts 16:3, we can read that after Paul heard of this outstanding reputation, he wanted to take Timothy along with him. And Paul immediately began equipping Timothy with the task of spreading God's word. And that's great. He gave him a purpose straight away. Paul's strategy, as I said, was kind of like trial by fire. Paul equipped Timothy with the culture, circumcision, getting right with the people around him, everything like that, the teaching, the experience, and by putting him into the forefront of the ministry. I don't know about you, but it's kind of funny sometimes when have you ever done a trade over on a job, like a swapping? Someone's leaving, so they put in their 2 weeks notice, and they have to train you. And you sit there and you go, okay, am I going to be able to take the keyboard now? Or are you just going to be on the keyboard for the next 2 weeks? Because eventually I have to step in there and be able to do this. And it's weird, because sometimes people do that well. And sometimes people are just like, you don't have to worry about it. We will find out when you have the job. And they don't set you up for success at all. In Acts 17:14, we can read that Paul separated himself from Timothy, leaving Timothy and Silas in charge of a young congregation that was established in Berea. And I think the amazing thing about this is I was listening to a couple of podcasts about it, and they were like, Paul just abandoned him. Paul abandoned this young person to lead a whole church. Who does that? That's crazy. But it's not like Paul hadn't already started empowering him. It wasn't like Paul hadn't already started equipping him with the right things, with the right knowledge, the understanding, and how to do these things. It wasn't like he opened the door and says, they're yours, I'm gone. That's not what happened here. There was a lot going on here between Paul and Timothy of teaching, of nurturing, of mentoring to make sure he was ready to step up into that. But so it's similar to Moses, but it's still different because Moses was gone. Paul was gone for a minute, and then he'd come back again, and there'd be letters, and there'd be more conversations, right? Moses left Joshua, but Paul was still around. And he allowed Timothy to physically do the job while still feeding him, while still equipping him, praying for him, right? And Timothy had one of the most challenging ministries, I think. The church in Ephesus, with false doctrines, a young congregation. But Paul allowed Timothy to lead. What does that mean? That Paul trusted him. Paul trusted him, and he expected Timothy to win, to have success there. But if not, there was still a trust. I think with teenagers nowadays, we can train and train and train as much as we want. But unless we trust them to actually step into the role and give them that chance, that's never going to really take an effect. We have a program that I'm trying to finish setting up. It's called the Young Preachers Program. And we're going to get some of the young men to start practicing how to be preachers. And it's going to be great, I hope. And I really hope that first Sunday where we say, hey, it's the Youth Sunday that we are trying to get planned for however many years now, and you're preaching, I hope it goes well. But you know what? There's not even just a hope. I'm trusting that God's going to bless that because there's a reason for all of these things. But we need to get out of the way sometimes to allow them to try. And it's not about just that trial and error. It's about Paul saying, I'm not going to be around so that you can do. And if it goes well, great job. And if it doesn't, I'm going to pick you up, dust you off, and we'll go round two. You know, and I think that's the best part about this. The Paul and Timothy relationship isn't just like an abandonment, it's all yours, I'm out of here. It's I'm going to give it to you, but I'm going to come back in and keep speaking into you and keep helping you in these situations. The Apostle Paul recognized the value of developing Timothy into a young minister and an effective member of the team who is empowered for success. I think that's the key part here. It wasn't just about, he can do this job so I can move on. It's he's empowered. He's been taught. He can now do these things. I'm not setting him up to failure. I'm setting him up for success. Teenagers nowadays, it's as simple as, did you win or did you lose? That's the reason why I say this stuff, because the culture nowadays, it's like, if you lose, well, there's no losers. You get a trophy anyway. Good job. Boy, do I hate that. Because there's nothing that you can improve on. If you still get awarded a trophy, you're going to think that you're a winner. But you didn't. You didn't win. And I think that's the tough part. You know, I see my boys, and they did some jiu-jitsu tournaments like last year, I think it was, or 2 years ago. And they stepped out onto the mats. And as soon as their feet hit on the mats, I was like bursting with pride. I'm like, they've already won. They've already won. And they lost their matches. But you know what? They tried. And that's a victory. There was no runners-up trophy or take-home a participation trophy. And I don't think I'd allow that in my house. But the point is, they had already won because they tried. Right. And what was my job? It wasn't to turn around and say, you suck, you failed. It was to turn around and say, let's get back up and we'll try again next time. Here's how we can do things differently, but you did such a good job. You know? And I think that's the key part of all of this. We can kind of stick where failures are, and they didn't do well. But you've got to know that the teenagers are thinking that as well. Because what they're being told is, you can be anything, you can do anything, you'll never lose. And you think that's not good. Because what they're doing is there's no real development happening in there. Mentoring isn't allowing someone to stay in that place and rewarding them for it. Mentoring is saying, we need to get this ball rolling. We need to get moving down this journey. Because you've been in this one spot for a long time. I'll be open with you. I'm 34 years old, turning 35 this year, and I still have dad issues. Like my dad left when, I was really young, like 32 years ago, 33 years ago. I wasn't old enough to remember, but I still have dad issues. The problem with that is it's really easy to stay there. And you can ask Elder Don. He has to kick me in the butt to get that ball rolling, to get away from that and keep that moving. Because if not, I stay there. It's really unhealthy. Because you stay put and you stay stagnant and you allow it to affect every single part of your life. And I promise you, it's such a challenge. But you can see the blessings of God when you allow him to start taking those things. And it's not in your strength, but it's in his. And I think that's the whole part of this. Paul wasn't saying that Timothy might win or lose. He's saying it's all up to God and God's strength now, and I'm trusting him with that. So when we mentor, when we're trying to equip and pass the torch to the teenagers, it's trusting. It's trusting, but it's allowing God to lead in all these things as well. God chose Joshua. God put Timothy on Paul's heart to choose him there. There's a leading from God. It wasn't just a random coincidence, okay? The third example I have for you is Jesus and the disciples. Oh, dropping the clicker. That's good. It's going to be healthy for it. Sorry. Jesus and the disciples. Jesus didn't choose those who were the best. And I think that's the tough part. I've had people in different churches come up to me, and we had some like really good athletes in the south of England in one of the churches I worked at. And they played for the youth football team, and everyone wanted to mentor them. And you go, why? And they go, well, do you know who they're connected to? They're connected to the big-time football team around here. They might be able to get me some tickets. They might, you're mentoring from the wrong reasons. Jesus didn't choose the athletic one, the handsome one, the most, the top of the top shelf people. He chose the people who were passed on, who had been looked at and said, no thanks, I don't want them anymore. And I think that's the thing. We can look at all those ones that are getting all the attention, but it's the ones that are slipping to the back that we need to love as well. So you have Moses and Joshua. Moses who journeyed with Joshua throughout the whole time, who led him and showed him examples of how to live for God and trust in God throughout all those things. And then you had Paul and Timothy who already had an established reputation and relationship and understanding with Jesus. And Paul equipped him, trained him, and then gave him that leadership position, but came back and kept feeding to him. Jesus is now looking at those people who've been passed over. They're not good enough. They're the bottom of the barrel. And he's picking them up and saying, actually, you need to be loved as well. You need to be trained because you can do a great work here too. What this tells me is you have those ones that are really well pre-trained, ready to go, Timothy's. Top standard, great job, 10 out of 10. Well, those are the kids, so you should be pushing them. But not every single teenager is going to be like that. And you may know teenagers that are on fire for Jesus, that love Jesus with their whole heart, that know him, trust him, know where they're going when they die, can talk to people who don't know Jesus and can get them to believe in Jesus. Praise God. But then the majority of them are going to be the ones that are like, I don't know what to do. I don't know who he is. I don't know what to believe anymore. And those are the bottom of the barrel guys. Not in a rude way, but they've been looked over because they're not the outspoken ones. There's a couple of guys, and I'm going to brag on Joe Daniels a little bit. Because when I first got here, Joe was super shy. Super shy. I love Joe. Joe is fantastic. He's a phenomenal young man. If you get to talk to him, he's great. I love Joe. The reason why I love Joe is because Joe's very honest. And if he doesn't want to do something, Joe will tell you he doesn't want to do something. And that just makes me want him to do it even more. So we've gotten to the point now that Joe, we've met for so many years now. And me and him, he trusts me. And I trust him. And he's a good guy. And he's turned into one of my most reliable leaders on a Friday night. I can count on one hand how many times in the last 5 years that Joe has missed a Friday night. The guy is dependable. And now we look at it and I go, Joe, you're going to get up on the microphone and start doing announcements for youth group. Oh, no, I'm not. Oh, no, I'm not. Well, yeah, you are. Because eventually you need to start kicking that ball down the hill and get it rolling again, right? Because the next step isn't just to be good at being dependable. It's stepping up and doing more. And Joe has taken the challenge. And Joe's like my success story. I love Joe. He's fantastic. But he's not pre-trained. He wasn't confident. He wasn't ready to go. He was the guy in the background. But now Joe's like my guy, and I trust Joe, and it's fantastic. And I think that's the thing that Jesus looks at, is because Jesus looks at the heart. He didn't look at the outside. He didn't look at what's going on and why they're passed over there. He looked at their hearts and said, I'm choosing you guys. And how Jesus did mentoring and training was he taught the truth. He showed the disciples how to do ministry. They walked around with him, spent a lot of time with him, ate food. They, went to different places on boats and walking around, all these different things, all these amazing miracles that they got to see. But Jesus taught by using his love, bless you, to be an example. So Jesus taught by love. John 13:34-35 says, a new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, if ye have love one to another. You know how you know you're going to be my disciples? Because people are going to see how much you love each other. and I love you, and you need to love them just as much as I love you. And Jesus loved them, and he cared for them. But what he didn't do is allow them to stay still. He didn't allow them to stay at the bottom of the barrel. Jesus brought them up, and he trained them. And we can read that he sent them out. And when they came back, and some of them were like, yeah, we did a great missions trip. It was fantastic. And then others were like, oh, we got booed and kicked out and chased out. And Jesus said, you know what, everyone, we're just going to have some breakfast right here. Come and tell me your stories. Tell me what's going on. I care. And that's another form of mentoring here of, he spent a long time before sending them out to do. It was a long time of him showing them. And I like this model, and it's kind of like, I call it the Jesus model because that's what he did. But for Joe, that's what I did. And now Joe is doing the stuff that I've asked him to do. And he's doing the announcements. And he's taking the registers. And he's being the most dependable guy on my team. And he's showing up week and week and week and week. And I think that's the amazing thing. You put time into a young person, they will put time into you as well. That relationship is the biggest and most important thing to get this whole thing started. And then you can turn around and say, well, let's start talking about your prayer life. Let's start talking about what you're reading in the Bible. Let's start talking about who Jesus is to you. Let's start getting to those nitty-gritty things. But if you walk in and you try and do that straight away, that's the issue. It's going to scare them off. It's going to shut them down. I think Jesus knew all of his disciples. He modeled each aspect of what he was teaching. He modeled in the way he lived. He knew what he wanted them to become. He knew what he wanted them to accomplish. But Jesus did this amazing thing, and it was just he loved and loved and loved. And I always have this question. Army asked me this question the other day because he was reading it in his Bible, and he said, did Jesus know that Judas was going to betray him? I said, what does it say? What does it say in the Bible? And he said, well, yeah. I said, but did he still wash his feet? Did he still give him that meal? Did he still love him? And it's tough because some of those teenagers are going to take you for a run. And I'm not saying that you're Jesus and they're Judas, but in this situation, it's that type of thing of you can pour out all your love and you will be offended and you will be hurt and you'll feel betrayed. But the important thing is they will remember that time. They will remember that time that you poured out into them, because that's the important thing here. And we can see throughout the whole Bible really great role models of mentoring, of passing the torch to the younger generation. And I just want to encourage you, we're just going to finish here. How are you doing this in your life? Who are you mentoring in your life? It may not be a teenager. It may be a parent. It may be a friend. It may be a coworker. You can mentor or pass the torch to the next people in your life, and it can be people close to you now. It doesn't have to be teenagers. These are all great examples, but they can be applied to any situation here. But if you have teens in your family, how are you pointing them to Jesus? It is a crazy world. It is a ridiculous world, and it is just getting darker. How are you pointing them to the light? How are you pointing them to Jesus? Is it by words? Are you telling them what to believe, or are you showing them what you believe? Because again, you speak louder with your example than with your words. If I just told my boys the whole time, you will believe in Jesus, you will, I guess how long that relationship with Jesus is going to last. But if I show them how Jesus has changed our lives, how Jesus brought us 5,000 miles across the world to land in Spokane Baptist. How Jesus does these incredible things. That's what lasts. The example there of continual pursuit of Jesus Christ. And how are you passing on the truth to those who are next? How are you passing on the knowledge, the truth here? Because the world's got a lot of lies. I've already said that. And it's going to cloud, and it's going to crowd, and it's going to crowd out the truth. It's okay to be this way. It's okay to do that. It's okay to think this. The truth's right here. How are we passing that on? We have a couple of different things that happen in the Pastor Tom room for the teenagers. Wednesday nights, there's 5 young men through there right now going through Joshua 17. And we go through the book of the Bible chapter by chapter, and we try and dissect it as much as we can so that they understand how to do that. So they understand how to do a a Bible study and how they can do that for themselves. That's why we do it. It's not just to show them how good we are at it, but it's to try and teach them, to train them how to do that as well. Deuteronomy 6, 5-7 tells us, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart and of all thy might, and these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto the children, and thou shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when they walkest by their way, and when they liest down, and when they risest up. When you sit down, when you stand up, when you walk on by, when you're lying down, when you're near a young person, you should probably be talking to them about Jesus. That's what the Bible is kind of telling me there. Everything, any opportunity you can, tell them about Jesus. Because you don't know when that one seed, that one perfectly placed seed is going to land in that fertile soil, and it is going to sprout, and it will take root, and it will grow into something incredible. And passing the torch is all about that. It's about taking the time to sow the seeds, to tell them the truth, to value them enough to tell them the truth. So we have, as a responsibility as Christians, to pass on the truth to those around us. Proverbs 22:6 tells us, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. That is tough. It is tough work. My sons are 9 and 8, and I can tell you it's tough, and I know it's just going to get tougher. It is just going to be harder work as we get further into life. But we have a responsibility. The Bible tells us to do it this way so that they do not leave, so they do not lose it. Pass on the knowledge to them. Share your experiences. Allow the truth to speak for itself. I think that's the best part we can do here. So, I just want you to think, very last thing here, and then we'll be done. The key thing that these Moses, Paul, and Jesus did was they affirmed faith. They affirmed the faith that the young people had. They valued the people enough to bring them along, to teach them, to spend time with them. And also it was a building up. It wasn't just a abandonment thing. Okay? So how they did this, the different styles, one all the way through to the end until death, one until they had to move on to a different ministry and allow them to be in that place, and the other just loving them and living with them for however many years until Jesus went to the cross. And then the disciples stepped out in their faith in Jesus Christ and did what they were going to do. And there's training, and there's probably a lot of craziness going on there, but the thing is, mentoring happens in different ways. There's different success rates for different ways of this. I want to tell you that the young people in our church now, they need to be valued. They need to be loved. If you don't spend one-on-one intentional time with a young person, feeding them and telling them the truth, I want to encourage you to do that. We have a mentoring program Wednesday nights, so we can have people speaking into your life. If you need to be mentored, if you are lacking in certain areas, I encourage you to be mentored. We have married couples who want to do marriage mentoring with other people who may feel like their marriage is a little bit rocky. There's no judgment here. They will pray for you. They will love on you. They will spend intentional time with you. If you're a single person and you want some mentoring, we'll tie you up with the right person there. If you think you could pass on the truth or your example, your experience to a young person, I've got a lot of young people who need mentoring. Because this world, as I keep saying, is just getting darker and darker. And my schedule is getting fuller and fuller of mentoring young men. So if you have time to spend with a young lady, a young man, if you have time to be mentored or to be pointed to Jesus in all situations, I encourage you to do so. Don't let these things get into a big, that oil change get into a big situation. Allow yourself to be mentored, allow yourself to be looked after, to have someone older, wiser, feeding into your life, okay? Because that's how we do it. That's how we pass the torch. That's how we pass the torch. That's how we allow people to step into these situations, is that intentional, one-on-one time. Care, love, value. And that's how it works. I hope this was kind of helpful. The teens do feel valued in this church. I'm not telling you they don't. They do feel loved. I just want more of it for them. I just want more and more and more, just because I don't think it could ever be enough. I want to get to that point where Spokane Baptist does not have that 16 or 18-year-old to 25 gap anymore. That's my goal. If you can help support that, that'd be fantastic. I'm going to pray, and then are you going to come up? You good? I'll pray, and then we can just be dismissed, okay? Lord Jesus, thank you for this time. Thank you for your word, that we can look and see great role models of mentoring, of care, of love, of guidance. God, thank you that you allow us to meet together safely in your house here. God, I pray you just bless this time. Help us all to hear your words. May your words stay and mine just disappear, God. But God, I pray that we will all leave changed or challenged at least tonight. God, thank you for all you do for us, for your love and mercy, for your Son, Jesus Christ, who died on the cross for us. In your name I pray. Amen. You guys are good. Thanks very much. Yeah.